I want to talk about the decision-making process for you after the diagnosis. I mean, we've spoken about making a decision to have a mastectomy. What do you think life is going to be like? I mean, we grow up, you and I can appreciate this, right? With breasts, right? I mean, they become who we are as women, right? We feed our children.
Right.
What does that feel like, thinking about they're going to be gone?
Yeah. My cousin said to me early on in this journey, she said, just cut them off and get yourself a new set of tatas. And I would love to think that it's that simple. For me, it is a means to an end. I would say that it is the best way that I can ensure that I am here for my children. And I can't tell you exactly what it is going to be like. What I can tell you is that as the date gets closer to me actually getting a surgery date, I can feel myself getting a little bit more anxious on the phone with the doctors. I can feel myself getting a little bit more anxious about what's life going to look like, because it's a series of surgeries, and what's it going to look like in the in-between? How do I get to show up for my kids? How do I get to show up for my family? What am I going to need? Are my parents going to have to come into town? What happens at work? There's so many things that become impacted. And just at the end of the day for me, knowing that this is what I've been saying to people is like, they've served their purpose. They fed my children. Now it's time to just take away any risk that comes with having them.
Did you ever think about not having reconstruction?
No, I didn't. For me personally, I feel like I'm young enough, and I am not someone who is really like an out there person, but I want to know that I can feel good about myself. I don't think the path of nothing would work for me.
Right.
I also have friends who have opted to go in that direction. And so I think it really becomes personal choice. And I know for me that that's not the direction that I want to head.
Was this a clear choice? I mean, there was no, yes, I'm definitely doing whatever it takes to not have that feeling of that cancer somewhere in my body.
Yeah, I'm a person who will kind of, if I'm in, I'm all in. That's my personality. And so knowing that this was the best chance for no reoccurrence, that's where I sit. And so the dangers that came along with radiation versus the pain that's going to be associated with these surgeries, it wasn't a choice to me, because I think that for me, in hearing different options, this made the most sense to minimize my risk and also not have any effect on the rest of my body. There was discussion about the potential side effects of radiation, and I already am going to be facing side effects with the hormone therapy that I'm going to be taking. And so to minimize side effects, to minimize unknowns, that's part of this whole journey. Is there's so many unknowns, and there's so many pieces where you have to wait for an answer, and then we've got to figure out the next step. And I want a path, I want a journey that I know, here's where we're heading. This is the direction that we're going, and the most that we are going to be facing is the surgery, the time, the pain, the suffering, all of that, but knowing that it's not going to impact the rest of my body the way that radiation would.
And how long between surgery and reconstruction?
I have no idea. Period? That's, we're in this zone right now of I'm waiting for a surgery date, and I will have much more information soon. And I think it's really important that this is my journey. There's no judgment. If people say, I have a very good friend who is going through the same thing, and she opted for radiation. And so we've talked about, she did not want to go through surgery. That was not her path. And so the ability to support in a non-judgment space when it comes to all of this becomes really important, because that's her journey. This is my journey. So there might be somebody who's out there listening or watching this and saying, that's not at all the choice I made. And that's totally fine. This is not about my choice is the right choice.
Right.
This was the journey and the choice that I made for me.
How did your care team, how did they play in all of this?
Oh, absolutely. Immensely. The care team that I am with helped me. I mean, here's what I will say. This is the first time that I've gone on a journey like this. Like I've said previously, we don't have cancer in my family. There's no cancer history. And so even my mom to this day will say to me, we've never done this before. So ask the question. And so the care team became really important because they gave time and space. They, thank God for the portal, because there's questions that pop up at 2 a.m. and I can throw it right in there and say, but what about this? And so that care team became extremely important because they were able to say, yes, here's what you might have read, here's what you might have heard, but here's the reality and the science behind it.
And I think I've heard you say more than once, don't Dr. Google. Don't go to Dr. Google.
I mean, here's the thing. The internet's great for so many things. I know for me, what I have found support in are some of the Facebook support groups where there are other people who have gone through things.
Right.
But I also have to be in the right mindset, so I think it's moderation for everybody when it comes to what are you Googling? How are you Googling it? Sometimes I will look up a term if I don't know it, but to sit and Google for hours and hours, we've had to make a really conscious decision in my family to say, please don't go to the internet. Like, let's go to the doctors, and making sure that when I go to these support groups, I can't do it at night. The one night that I did it at night, I didn't sleep at all because then I had all this stuff in my head before I tried to go to bed. So the timing of it has become really important, and also knowing that at the end of the day, the experts are the doctors. And so, yes, there's information out there, but there's lots of bad information as well.
Have you brought your children and your husband to doctors?
My husband has come with me. My kids have not, but I have a lot of open conversations with my kids. I say this all the time, for the good or the bad, they're raised by a therapist. And so I even had a discussion, and we had a family discussion about me even sitting down, because for me, it's really important that my kids are okay with me sharing this. They've been on their own journey with this. There has been some incredible support that they have received. Both of my boys play sports, and my son's baseball team, the week that everybody found out on the team, because we were in the middle of a tournament during my surgery, the coach had pink arm sleeves for the baseball team. Wow. This past week, the soccer team at St. Michael's, Pat Hambleton, is just an amazing coach, and he had pink socks for all the boys to wear as part of Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So there's been these really wonderful ways that my kids have been able to be supported. And both Jason Smith, who coaches the Mavericks, and Pat, who coaches St. Michael's Soccer, have said, like, this is someone in our family is impacted. And so that's been the most important part for me, is that my children get to have a voice in this as well, because I'm very aware that this is not just my journey. It's my journey, it's my husband's journey, it's my ex-husband's journey, it's my family's journey, it's my ex-husband's family's journey. They're all along for the ride. And so I've really been intentional about making sure that my kids are a part of the process.
I mean, you don't have a choice because you have boys. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's been harder to talk about breast cancer because they're boys?
No, and in fact, my children, I had to take a certain test to make sure that this was not genetic, because there was a chance, if this had come back to be a genetic piece, that I could pass it on to my kids. So it was really important.
Including boys.
Including the boys. And so, we've talked about breast cancer. We've talked about testicular cancer, because I have a friend who's going through that. We've talked about prostate cancer. These are the things that the kids have been able to have conversations about. And I'm not saying that that happens in every family.
Right.
My family's a little different. I was a health educator for 5 years. So my kids and I have talked about all of the pieces. But the reality is, they have a mom, they've got a grandmother, they have girl cousins, they have aunts in their family. And so they are going to be surrounded by women. And so just the journey and understanding that, and even for me, Val, like, how long have we seen pink that pops up in October? Pink means a whole different thing to my boys now. there's a whole different digging in that they do. You know, all of my oldest son, Jordan, he just bought pink gloves and a pink bat. And, you know, there's, and my two stepsons, it's all become so different for them. And so we've talked about all of it because they will be surrounded by women. And so it's important to share that story.
So I guess part of this whole journey is also taking control. Mm-hmm. What is that like? Because really, cancer sometimes just feels really being out of control.
Yeah. You know, the whole thing is out of your control, except for the pieces you can control. So for me, the pieces I could control was how and when I told my children. I could control my treatment to an extent, and not everyone gets that choice. Sometimes it's told to you. You know, for me, I'm looking for someone to say, here's what you're going to do. Sometimes the choices, when it comes to survival, sometimes you don't want a choice. You just want to be told you're going to do this and this. The other pieces that I've controlled are how I talk about it with my family, how I communicate. You know, my husband and I have had great conversations around, sometimes there'll be big things happening in our lives. And the conversation has been around, well, I didn't want to bother you with this because I know you're going through. And so I've been able to say, I need you to still bother me with those things. This isn't going to take over. And so it's about, I'm still going to work every day and I'm still showing up, and I've had to manage my exhaustion a little bit. I'm more tired because I'm not sleeping as well, but I get to show up every day and still be me. And also on days where I'm struggling, the journey included pulling back a little bit from everything. You know, I found myself a couple of days in a row not wanting to really go anywhere and having just this desire to spend time alone. And I'm really fortunate that I am surrounded by therapists at my work every day. And so, you know, just sitting and talking with people about how I was feeling, I knew I had to make that conscious choice to say, I'm going to control how this controls me. It's not going to take over, because there absolutely was a part of me that just wanted to go hide away in a corner and see no one. But that's not the journey that I want to be on long term.
And I don't know if you want me to use the word brave, but there is also, you have often heard of people, or I have often heard of people, talk about their breast cancer journey after the journey ends. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're doing it as it's happening.
Yeah. I mean, for me, here's the thing. I can remember going to my son's baseball game about 4 days after I found out that I had cancer. And I sat next to my friend Heidi. And I said, here's what's going on. And she said to me, I haven't had a mammogram in 2 years. And I said, if you do anything, please, for me, go get your mammogram. And the next morning, she texted me and said, my mammogram is scheduled. And so for me, this Breast Cancer Awareness Month, you know, we always have these awareness months where they're 1 month. I want this to be 12 months. And I want people to be talking and people to say, mammograms matter. This, you know, getting to the doctor, having a physical, these things matter, because for me, this is about, if I can help spread the word in some way of saying, look, I didn't think it was going to happen to me. I was the very last person who I ever thought would end up with a cancer diagnosis. I think all of us who end up with a diagnosis of something would be able to say, well, I didn't think it was going to be me. But the journey for me is about helping people get connected to services. Dr. Gupta, who's in our community, who is my oncologist, there's other folks here, you know, whether it's Shore Regional, whether it's Johns Hopkins, whether it's Mercy, there's hospital systems. We're surrounded by amazing doctors. Let's use them and make sure that we're doing as much as we can to be preventative so that we don't end up in a bad situation.
And how do you answer someone who says, I'm just so frightened. I'm frightened of finding something out?
Yeah, aren't we all? Yeah, and you know what? Here's the thing. We can't take away the frightening piece of this. I wish I could say that I wasn't scared. I'm scared every day. And so it's a matter of how we get through that. And, for some people, it's support groups. Maybe you go to a support group. For some people, it's talking to the doctor. For some people, it might be hearing other people's experiences and other people's journey. There's never a time when someone finds out that I have breast cancer that I don't hear a story about someone in their life who has gone through the journey. And so whatever that support looks like, one of those pieces, you asked about control. What I start to realize that I need to be able to control is what I need. And so if it's a support group, I need to make the time for that. If it's going to the gym because I know that this hormone medication is going to impact my ability to build and retain muscle, that's what I need. So some of those pieces become really important.
Part of this breast cancer journey, of course, is all the decisions that you have to make almost kind of daily, not just mentally. How did that look like?
I was connected to some great doctors, and I knew that I would have the ability to either stay local, be across the bridge, maybe be a combination of both. And there were lots of people who were saying, go seek an expert, get a second opinion. And I was prepared to head to Boston and get that second opinion.
At Mayo?
At
It doesn't matter.
I can't remember.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
I was prepared to head to Boston at the Dana-Farber Institute and get a second opinion. And what I came to really figure out was that there was great resources right here in our community. And when I was able to get a second opinion, and the person who I got the second opinion from also knew the oncologist I'd already been working with, and it was in your studio, actually. And there was this sense of peace that came over me because it was the decision of whether or not I needed chemotherapy.
Because she sat there and she said, you're not going to need it. And go and get an opinion, but you're not going to need it.
Right. And that became a second opinion. And so those second opinions were really important. And so that then solidified for me, okay, I already know that radiation is not the direction I want to go.
Right.
I know that my best chance of minimizing my risk of reoccurrence is heading in this bilateral mastectomy. And for me, it became trusting the experts. I'm not the expert. I'm the expert in mental health. I show up as that all the time, but this was not my expertise. And so part of it was I needed to allow the experts to help me figure out my journey, no different than how often do I help people figure out their journeys in mental health. But it's about sort of taking that step back and pausing to be able to know I don't have all the answers. So I've got to rely on these experts.
Right.
And how awesome that it's right here in our own community where I could help, where that second opinion came.